All right. Hello, everyone who is watching, and welcome to this interview with Sharon Lagas. So, I want to tell you a little bit about Sharon and her backstory before we jump into a couple questions today. If you have any additional questions, you can send them in the chat. But I know that you will enjoy hearing about her story and all she's done for her rare disease community, and especially women and girls. So, after 3 generations of her family were diagnosed with Alport syndrome, including herself, her sons, her brother, her mother, and her 2 nieces, Sharon co founded the Alport Syndrome Foundation. Since then, thousands of patients and families with Alport have been connected, and international research coalitions have formed. Last year, Sharon was a recipient of a Sanofi Genzyme Torch Award, which stands for Transforming Outreach in Rare Disease and Creating Hope. Additionally, Sharon has worked hard to advance the status and care of women and girls in the Alport syndrome community, who are traditionally considered to be just carriers of the disease. As a woman impacted by an X-linked condition myself, although different from Alport syndrome, I'm very grateful for her work, and I'm going to be asking her a few questions today. And yeah, let's jump right in. So Sharon, thank you so much for being with me today, and congratulations on winning the Sanofi Genzyme Torch Award last year.
Thank you very much.
Can you tell us what is Alport syndrome and how does it affect males and females?
Sure. So Alport syndrome is a rare kidney disease. It causes kidney failure, hearing loss, and vision problems, all because of a little collagen defect in the basement membranes of each of those organs. And there's different genetic types of Alport syndrome. The most common is X-linked Alport syndrome. And because of an X-linked disease, as you know, females have 2 X's and males have an X and a Y, the disease more severely affects males. So Alport syndrome's traditionally been viewed as a male disease, which we're trying to change that perception.
Thank you for that explanation. So why did you decide to co-found the Alport Syndrome Foundation?
Well, like you said in the introduction, in 2004, we had 7 family members diagnosed at the same time. I mean, we knew we had kidney disease in the family, but we never knew what it was. And then all of a sudden, we found out, 3 generations had it. We were gonna have to relive it again. And it was, overwhelming and devastating for our family. So, what do? A mom with kids who are affected, you reach out, you try and find support. And there really wasn't anything specifically for Alport syndrome. So I was lucky enough to connect with a few other families and concerned friends. And we launched the foundation in 2007. And since then, it's been an amazing experience, not only an empowering and healing experience for our family, but for all the families that we've been able to connect with.
And how large would you say that your community is now?
Oh, wow. I was just on a call today, and I think we had 100 new members join after our last family meeting. But we have a Facebook support group page that's over 3,000, 3,000 people. And it's obviously international, not just in the US, but, they estimate that there's maybe 30 to 60,000 people in the United States with Alport syndrome. So, there's quite a community that we have, that we've created.
Yeah, it definitely is a strong community for sure. My next question, when did you first learn that females with Alport syndrome are not simply carriers, but can have the disease?
So I was going to these conferences and they kept talking about carrier, and there were other board members, female board members, the same thing. And we looked at each other and went, wait, how can I be a carrier and be in stage 3 chronic kidney disease? Something's not adding up here. And so we started talking to our medical advisors, and, we had some international workshops, and, we just said, how can you use the word carrier? I mean, I have less than 50% kidney function. And they were like, oh, yeah, Okay. So that was, it was actually from personal experience and other personal experiences of other women with Alport syndrome.
Yeah, that sounds really similar to the ALD community, the rare disease community that I'm a part of. You know, women were definitely experiencing symptoms for as long as the disease, existed, of course, but it wasn't really until those conversations among women in the community started happening and people started putting the pieces together and feeling like that the carrier label just wasn't fitting. Um, in the case of X-linked diseases where so many of the women and girls have symptoms.
Yeah, I mean, they're finding that I think the number is 40% of the women over 60 go on to end stage renal disease or kidney failure. So, the women would just have a different pathogenesis or disease progression than the men, particularly in the X-linked Alport syndrome. We have other genetic types, recessive and dominant forms that have different, in the recessive, the women are affected as much as the men. But certainly for the X-linked, we started to just change that perception of, yes, us X-linked females had the disease. We just had a different progression of it.
Yeah. And why do you think that, moving away from that carrier language is so important?
Well, I think all of us, when you think of a carrier, you think unaffected. So, we had a lot of women who were concerned for their children, like an X-linked disease, right? Your mom, you pass it on to your children, and you're so concerned for your children's health. And, you think somebody says you're just a carrier, so you don't pay attention to your health when in reality, you should be. So I think it just, connotates that there is no reason to be worried. And we actually had researchers or, clinicians say, well, women's progression, it's much later and it's not as severe as men. And why would you want to change the word carrier and scare women? And we thought, well, how presumptuous for somebody to make that decision, for us. And the more patients and women that we talked to, the more they wanted to know. So whether, they wanted to know the truth, whether they had, a certain percentage and how it might affect, their family planning. And so we've been working really hard to change that. And we did a series of workshops with the international community, and we brought together researchers, patients, clinicians, geneticists, and we wrote a series of papers that included all of those collaborations, all of those stakeholders about women in Alport syndrome. And I think that was kind of the beginning of the awareness and the change that we were able to start to make.
Yeah, that is such incredible work. And, as someone from a different X-linked community, since I've known about Alport syndrome and the Alport Syndrome Foundation, I've really looked to your community as something that I hope that the ALD community can do. We're definitely in the works. A lot of women in our community are not accepting the term carrier anymore, especially because in our case, about 90% of women eventually do get symptoms. So, it's just such a high chance of getting symptoms that carrier just connotates something that isn't the reality for any of us. So I really hope that we can follow like a similar path and, have women included in clinical trials. Like I know that the Alport Syndrome Foundation has helped facilitate. So I'm really inspired by all the work that you've done there over the years, for women and girls especially.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I remember there was the very first natural history study for Alport syndrome when we were first, getting some pharmaceutical interest, and the majority of people, guess who, signed up to be part of the natural history study was all the moms, right?
Yeah.
So it ended up being an incredible natural history study of women and Alport syndrome. But anything in the rare disease community takes persistence and it takes the patient voice. And so, educating your patient community is number one, because they can all go back to their doctors, right? And bring the information and challenge the status quo and ask, for the appropriate care. And then it takes all the stakeholders working together really to make, a real, a real change, in all aspects of people caring for, ALD or Alport syndrome.
Definitely. So what do you see as the biggest barrier that is still facing women and girls with Alport syndrome?
Well, we certainly still have more work to do. So we hear from women all the time that they were told they didn't have to worry, they were just a carrier, and so we have definitely more work to do there. I also do think women are caregivers, and they do tend to be focused on their families or their husband or others that might be ill, and so just making sure that they know that they need to take care of themselves, that they're important because they're taking care of all these other people, is also a very important point. And women need to know. So there are women that don't show symptoms or but are planning a family, and they need to understand how having this disease might affect that, or not. And just the fact of potentially passing it on to a child is also something that really has to be thought out and talked to your partner about. I was telling you the other day that there actually is something called genetic guilt syndrome, where a lot of women feel guilty about passing on this disease to their children. So those are all things that are really important for women to consider.
Definitely. And I think all the points that you said, tie in so well to the mission of Remember the Girls, the organization that I founded for women impacted by X-linked diseases. And, I think when you say, oh, there's so much more work to be done, while it is true in these individual X-linked communities, it's also something that we can work on together. Like if the medical professionals knew that they can't assume that a woman with an X-linked disease is a carrier, that would just benefit all of us because, they would relearn what they were initially taught when they were in med school. And yeah, it's so unfortunate that we are up against, all this outdated information. But I think spreading the word, talking to your doctors, telling all your medical professionals. I know I tell literally even my dentist probably ALD and how I'm a carrier. I'm referred to as a carrier, but that mean like I still have a high chance of eventually getting symptoms. I literally tell every medical professional I know that because, you never know what other person that they'll see. And if they now know that X-linked diseases aren't what they thought they were, hopefully that'll benefit, one of their other patients down the line. So I definitely agree that we just need to keep talking pretty much.
Yeah, and it's important you tell all your providers. I mean, Alport syndrome affects hearing, it affects kidneys, it affects eyes. So it is important that you let all your physicians know. And like you said, you can't underestimate the power of collaboration and the power of collaboration of patient organizations. I think NORD has the slogan, alone we are rare, but together we are strong. And that collective voice is so important, right? It gives all our small organizations so much more empowerment, in the medical community, in the rare disease community, in the kidney community. For us, it's really important, and all of our organizations working together, we have so many priorities and strategies that are aligned.
Yeah, definitely agreed. And once I learned that there was other X-linked diseases, which, I was really only in the ALD bubble for most of my life. And I learned that there was these other X-linked diseases like Alport syndrome or Duchenne muscular dystrophy, where women in those communities were, fighting the same barriers that we were. We might be from very different diseases, but that X-linked is still the same. So I feel like there is really something that connects all of us, but connects everyone in the rare disease community. Those 8,000, I mean, the numbers changing, like obviously every probably every couple of days. But yeah, there's definitely something that connects all of us.
You did mention clinical trials, and we do have women involved in clinical trials, but not a lot. I mean, really, most of the clinical trials are really geared towards faster progressing disease, and women don't necessarily have that. So that definitely is I guess another challenge, I would say, for any X-linked disease.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do hope that, I mean, obviously, I hope that women can be included in ALD trials at some point, but if anything, maybe there's, able to get access off label for these medications that, are being studied in men. Obviously, it's not ideal to not study them, in women as well, just because, the biological difference is there. But, I am trying to try to see the positives, but there is still a long way to go. But what do you hope for the future of women and girls affected by Alport?
Well, I hope that everybody gets diagnosed properly. That's a big challenge for our community as a whole. Often, misdiagnosis or the diagnosis journey is an extended period of time. So I certainly hope that women and girls get diagnosed early with Alport syndrome. As with many kidney diseases, the earlier that you're diagnosed, the more proactive measures you can take, whether they're just lifestyle changes or medication. There are some medications that prolong kidney function. So I would say that is number one. And number two would be that they get the appropriate treatment that they need in a timely manner, and over the course of their lives, that they're treated with equal weight as men and boys with X-linked Alport syndrome.
Definitely. Before we go to our last question, I wanted to circle back to another really great point you made, just because we got a comment from Rachel from Santa Fe Genzyme about how women also need to care for themselves. And I think that's such a great point, because I think it's about 87% of women are the primary caregiver for a child or a sick partner or a sick parent. And it's definitely, especially when you are having health issues yourself. I think I'm not a parent, so I don't have that lived experience, but I know a lot of women in the ALZ community, they feel a bit reluctant to maybe seek out care for themselves, because they feel like, oh, well, they're not suffering as badly as their son is, for example. So it's just easy to kind of brush that off or think you'll deal with it later. So what advice then would you give to women who do believe that they have symptoms, but haven't really approached or taken the time yet to get that proper care?
Well, I would say that you're the primary caregiver in the family, and if you're not healthy, or you're not taking care of yourself, that everybody else is going to feel that. So it isn't selfish, it is selfless, in that by taking care of yourself, you're taking care of your family. It's a really hard point to get across, because all of us as moms, our first concern is our children. But that is really really important. And with any genetic disease, it's really hard, because you're reliving it generation after generation. I watched my brother go on dialysis at 16 years old, and have 2 transplants, and he passed away at an early age. And then we had all these other family members diagnosed, my 2 boys, thinking, oh no, we're going to relive this again. So that's another challenge for women with X-linked and a genetic disease, is really they have a challenging lived experience, and now their family's been diagnosed. So the bottom line is, you're the main caregiver, and that caregiver needs care too. to make sure she's the best that she can be for, for her family.
Great. Thanks for the response. So I want to open up the floor to questions that anybody has for Sharon. But my last question is, and you did touch on this a little while ago, but why do you feel like it is so important for people across different rare diseases to work together towards similar goals?
Well, we can make a bigger impact. Simple as that, right? Rare disease means there's not many of us in each of our disease communities. And by working together, we can affect change. There's no question about it. I've seen it. I mean, our disease is in both the kidney space and the rare disease space. And it's the kidney space is great, but we're dwarfed by diabetes and other diseases that impact so many people. And then in the rare disease space, it's just so empowering to work with other organizations. Our goals are so aligned. We're all trying to raise awareness, but more than anything, we're trying to get treatments, for our diseases. And the best way to do that is to work together with the FDA, the NIH, and just provide our patient voice so we can let them know, what risks we're willing to take, and maybe things that can make clinical trials more successful, for our communities.
Great. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And it's always really exciting for me to get the Alport Syndrome Foundation newsletter and just see all the updates on the research side. Yeah, that's always something that's really exciting to see. And I think something else that's so valuable about the rare disease community is that we also just celebrate like each other's wins. There's 7, 8, 9, I've seen all different types of thousands of rare diseases. And it's just, it just always makes me really grateful to see that like other communities are getting, this research and getting these treatments and, connecting with the FDA. And it definitely makes me hopeful for ALD and many other rare diseases as well.
Yeah, I mean, we all learn from each other. I mean, I've been doing this now since 2006, and I'm learning something new every day from other organizations, from other Alport patients. I mean, that's the best way, is to share our experiences and see what works for one community, or what one community might have learned that you could apply to yours.
Yeah, I definitely have done that. I do that, all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. Okay, so we did have one question come in. So, what advice would you have for X-linked carriers who are seeking to have children in the future, / like what resources are available?
Well, I guess genetic counseling would be one in particular. And if you can find a genetic counselor who is, familiar with your disease or your disease state, whether it be kidney or it be, endocrinology or something like that, that would probably, be very important. Also, just if there is a community for your, for what you're dealing with, just speaking to other moms who have already gone through it. That's probably on our Facebook support page. That's probably one of the biggest topics is, family planning, or also, what resources did they seek and what their experiences were. And I would encourage genetic counseling, and then, the patient to patient connection.
Yeah, I definitely second both of those. Genetic counseling is definitely something I think that all carriers, quote unquote, all women with genetic diseases, all women with X-linked diseases definitely, just should have at some point in their lives, even if they aren't necessarily planning on having a family. I think the appointments that I've had with my genetic counselor have just been really helpful in like solidifying what I know about, X-linked inheritance, and what I know. Luckily, she is a specialist in ALD. But yeah, so she just really has like solidified what I already know, but it's still great to like speak to someone who's in that space and is such an expert in the genetic side of things. So I definitely agree. And it's great that people are also being open about the family planning aspect. I think sometimes people can be hesitant to bring it up just because, people may have a differing opinion on a topic, but I don't think that that's not a reason, to talk about it and to seek that support and just weigh your options and see what other women in the community and other couples have done. So it's great that conversations are happening.
Yeah, I mean, knowledge is power. And so just at least, understanding, you and your partner understanding, how the disease may or may not affect your family. Is there genetic testing available? If it's a boy or a girl, what it might look like. What are your chances, and what resources they may know of, resources that you don't know. So it is wonderful if you can find a genetic counselor who is, maybe in your disease space, but I think that's certainly, some place to start.
Agreed. All right. I just want to wait another minute to see if we have any other questions coming in right now. Let me see on the Facebook page.
I would like to say that I'm very thankful for the Torch Award, and I look forward to watching it later this month and see the new awardees. It's a fabulous way to raise awareness of your advocacy work, and really appreciate Sanofi Genzyme for their support of the Alport syndrome community and helping us raise awareness of the work that we're doing.
Yeah, I remember watching it last year on the Facebook Live, and it was such an exciting event. And I remember, of course, hearing about your story, and I was like, I need to get in touch with her ASAP because of that X-linked, connection. And I'm so glad that we're finally in touch and having this discussion here today. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to the event as well. I'm not sure if we did get one more question. So someone is asking if there is a link between Alport syndrome and IgA.
Yeah, IgA nephropathy is a different kidney disease. So they both, I believe, affect the glomerulus of the kidney. That's a mouthful, but no, they're different diseases. The thing about kidney disease is there's a lot of different initiations, but they kind of follow along the same path. So IgA is an immune globulin response. Alport syndrome is a collagen defect. But what happens is they both impact the kidney to the point where the kidney begins to scar, can no longer filter and do what it needs to do, and then it fails. So there are, clinical trials in IgA and in Alport syndrome for that target that scarring kind of fibrosis stage. So there is some overlap in terms of drugs that may, or therapies that may help IgA patients and Alport patients, but it's a different initiation of the disease.
Oh, okay. Thank you for clarifying that. All right. Well, I definitely encourage everyone to check out. Oh, we have another question.
Yay!
Is thin basement membrane linked?
Yes. So thin basement membrane disease used to be considered separate from Alport syndrome, but we now know that it's the collagen, the collagen that's affected is the collagen 4. So thin basement membrane disease is now part of Alport syndrome. It's actually considered the dominant form of Alport syndrome. And there are, again, different disease progressions within thin basement membrane disease. So, so that's, I would say, if anybody's been diagnosed with that, I would go back to your nephrologist and just make sure that you can get, we're lucky that there is some free or reduced genetic testing through Kidney Code and Renasight, Terra. And so genetic testing in our community has become quite available. So I would say if there's any questions about that. Even the person who asked about IgA nephropathy, I would suggest you go back to your nephrologist or your family physician, or if you have a genetic counselor, and talk to them about getting genetic counseling. It's never been, genetic testing has never been as accessible as it is now. So definitely a great time to take advantage of it.
One other question. Can you have Alport without symptoms such as blood and protein in urine?
The answer is yes. You can. There are people with autosomal dominant form of Alport syndrome that don't have any blood or protein. Excuse me. They may develop it later, but yeah, I would say that's probably rare. Most people usually show some blood in the urine pretty early on, but it is possible, unfortunately. So again, take advantage of that genetic testing if you can.
Yeah, that's definitely great advice. And I also love how, so much not only about Alport, but, so many other kidney diseases and similar conditions. And it just shows, how over the last 15 years and with so many people with rare diseases, you really do become the expert on the condition. And, you learn how to read these like complicated research papers and,
Yeah.
we have to be very self-sufficient when it comes to that. So you could definitely, you can definitely tell that you are an expert. That's for sure.
Well, I've been doing it a long time like you have. And, there's been, this change to be more and more collaborative. So there are now clinical trials that include multiple kidney diseases.
Mhm.
And that really is a win-win for many of the stakeholders. Like I said, there's a commonality, at a certain point in kidney diseases. And so that collaboration and having, multiple diseases, tested with medications that could potentially help them is happening, and it's very exciting.
Yeah, that is amazing, especially with I'd been doing some research lately on just how, the drug development pipeline works and just how long, it takes to get a single drug from the clinical trials to the market. So just as many patients that can be benefiting and can be involved in those trials just sounds like nothing but a good thing. So
Yeah, you got to work hard to kind of develop that landscape. When I first got started, there was nothing available for Alport syndrome. And now I think we've got 3 clinical trials and potentially more starting. And some of them are specific to Alport and some of them are collaborative, like I said. So, persistence pays off.
yeah, that's really amazing. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Sharon, for taking the time to speak with me today. And my apologies again for the technical difficulties. I'm embarrassed, but it happens. It happens on the news all the time now, doesn't it? You just kind
That
of get used to the technical difficulties, but
that's right. That's right. Well, it could have been partly on my end as well, but I'm glad we were able to connect and make it work.
yes, me too. Um,
Yeah.
so thank you everyone for watching, and you'll still be able to view this recording just in the same place you're watching it now. I also want to mention that this year's Torch Awards are going to be held on August 26th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on Sanofi US's Facebook page, and that you should attend and honor the incredible recipients from the rare disease community for this year as well. So I will just drop the link to the Facebook event right in the comments here. And yeah, thank you everybody again. And thank you so much, Sharon, for the time. And I'm really looking forward to, continuing our collaborative relationship and continuing to follow the work of the Alport Syndrome Foundation, of course.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Taylor. I really appreciate meeting you and having this interview. And I look forward to our future collaborations.
Same to you. All right. Have a great night.
All right.
See you
Bye.
soon.
Thank you.
Bye.